Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and today we are not just joined by one amazing guest and fellow entrepreneur. We have got two incredible guests, the co-founders of what I can already tell, even in the limited time that I've had the chance to talk with them off air. These guys are so much fun, and it makes sense that they are that way, and they've got such great energy because I can tell why they're able to inject those good vibes into all the different brands that they work with, the stories that they tell about these brands. I'm super excited for all of us to learn from them. So let me introduce you to Andrew Walker and Hayden Anderson, co-founders of the KANSO Creative, which is a brand identity and digital marketing firm dedicated to helping independent and community-rooted businesses tell their stories and stand out. With a shared background in design, branding, and strategy, Andrew and Hayden have built a company that transforms businesses into unforgettable brands through intentional storytelling and innovative design. When it comes to brands, as far as I'm concerned, if they've got a sweet neon sign, then it's a cool brand worth celebrating, and they absolutely have that. So if you're watching on video, you'll see their brand in action as well. Their expertise spans custom website development, SEO, social media management, and brand identity creation, all aimed at helping businesses thrive in an increasingly digital world. Today, they're here to share insights on the power of branding, the role of storytelling in business, and how companies can elevate their presence in a crowded marketplace. I'm excited about this one, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Andrew Walker and Hayden Anderson. All right, guys, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're super happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Heck yes. I will say it's always fun for me because during the intro music, I can always see the guests, and I saw Hayden was rocking out more than Andrew, so I'm going to kick it off with Hayden first. Take us beyond the bio. Who are you guys? Let's start with Hayden. Who are you? How'd you start doing all this cool stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a fun story. My family, we moved to the North Carolina area about 2 years ago. And I had been involved with as a media director and as a freelance graphic and brand designer for the last 7 years before that. And we moved up here and doing some transition. When you move to a new area, it's difficult to break into a market when you're doing freelance. And so as with my experience in graphic design, I went ahead and started working at a sign company and for businesses all over the country. And then I ran into Andrew. Andrew came to work for us. We needed a production guy, and he stopped in for just a little bit. That was kind of a fun experience. Yeah. And then he left. And after that, we just stayed connected. One of the funny things about that is every once in a while you run into somebody that you just seem to just want to throw ideas off of each other. And that's exactly what we did. We just started texting each other business ideas around the creative circle. And we knew we wanted to do something that helped businesses in our area. But what was funny was we had some really bad business ideas. Andrew would say that punched some holes through that one, and then I would be like, I don't think we should do that either. Anywhere from a giant 3D printing sign. It was we had all these weird ideas that came up to mind. But we finally kind of sat down and we saw branding. And we said, well, we have experience in that. I was doing that for the last 7 years just on a focus level. And I knew that was something I always had a passion for, was helping businesses succeed and be able to tell their stories properly and through visual and through storytelling. And the main avenue we found to be able to help businesses with that was through websites. And so we were able to approach businesses with a website and then be able to open the door to talk to them about branding. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today and on this podcast. So that's my side of the story.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, Andrew, I'm going to pick on you for a second because I love the fact that you gave me permission to potentially botch your company name, the pronunciation of it in the intro, the KANSO Creative. When it comes to KANSO, what the heck is the meaning behind that? Because you're two cool dudes, I can already tell, and I want to hear that backstory there.
Yeah, we names, and unfortunately, it was really hard to get them copywritten or get the domain name for it. So we just started thinking of things that really are important to us. I'm a huge fan of Japanese design, especially like Japanese carpentry. And in Japanese design, there's what's called wabi-sabi, and it's the 7 principles of design. Most people are familiar with feng shui. That's one of the 7 principles. Another one of the principles is kanso. Kanso means simplicity in Japanese, and the design principle is that simplicity of design, that sometimes it's the elimination of the unnecessary. And we kind of reflect that in our logo as well. There is not an actual S there, but the S is there just to kind of show that you don't need to have everything to have everything.
Yeah, I love that perspective, especially because one of my favorite brands, it's obviously a cliche here, is obviously Apple. I love the way that Apple uses white space. It's almost like the white space speaks for itself. I will say, though, looking at the Apples of the world, their branding feels a million miles above what the rest of us small solopreneurs and smaller business owners are doing. But it's funny because what we're talking about being the upper echelons of branding is actually the simplest form of branding. How do you guys navigate people through what branding is in a world where we do like making things more complex, especially with AI art? I would imagine a lot of people come to you guys and say, we can design things now thanks to AI, but how do you navigate people through that?
We get that a lot. We get that a lot. One of the things that we do is we just start with having a conversation. So part of our process when we approach someone or when they approach us, we come to them with this in mind. You are here and you want to be over here. So what's going on? What do you actually need? And then one of those things that we developed, that as we continue to listen to businesses talk about, hey, I don't know what I'm doing on social media. I'm not getting leads on my website. We sat down and we're like, there's definitely a path we keep running into. We keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again. But it all boils down to most businesses, small businesses, local businesses, large businesses, they don't know who they are first. So like we've developed the KANSO hierarchy for design and for branding. So basically, if you don't know who you are as a brand, so you don't know who your target audience is, you don't know even really what you're doing, and sometimes they do, but they don't know who they're actually reaching, then if they don't have that down, you shouldn't have a website. You got to figure out your brand first before you get a website to be out in front of people. And then once you get and what that means out into the world of the internet, and then we can talk about social media. So that's kind of our hierarchy. So first, establish who you are as a brand, know your target audience, know what you're doing, your mission, your values. Then we build your website. Then we talk about pushing you out into the world. And then at the end of the day, we'll start working on your social media, because then you'd be the most effective. 9 times out of 10, people just start, hey, I'm selling something because I need money or because I really like this. And they jump onto social media because it's available. But 86% of the people validate a business whether if they have a website or not. I don't know how many times I have not gone to a restaurant because they did not have a website, or I did not go to a particular store because they didn't have a website. It was just like, well, you have a Facebook, but you haven't posted in a year. So I don't know. So that's kind of our process, and that kind of leans into what we do.
Yeah. Foundation of what branding is. And I think the majority of people think when you ask them what branding is, they'll say Nike or Apple, and they'll mention the Nike swoosh or the Apple icon or the McDonald's arches. In reality, a logo is not branding. A logo is your smile. Branding would be your whole personality, who you are, who the person is behind everything. And then the smile is what they see first and what they identify with, but it's the whole personality. So with branding, it's more than just a logo. It's your brand voice, your messaging, your identity, who your target market is, all of those things, what areas you work in. So just trying to help people understand that and educate people.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll tell you what, I interview entrepreneurs for a living, many of which have been branding specialists. I've never heard that analogy that you just laid on us about branding being your smile. I've always heard about, we say branding is what other people are saying when you're not there, but or your logo is just like your smile. It's that one visual thing. I think that that's a really cool analogy that illustrates that point. And coming back to what Hayden said, I'll add on to that. I not only feel the way that you do. If a restaurant doesn't have a website and they haven't posted on Facebook in forever, I just assume that they're closed, and it might be the best restaurant in town. And on that note, though, I will say, Hayden, to your point, too many people, and this is why I appreciate your hierarchy, too many people, when they have their website, it's still hard to figure out what the heck that company does. I look at companies and entrepreneurs for a living. A lot of times I still can't. When I go on your website, for example, I love how big and bold that headline is. It's your story. Let us help you tell it. And then underneath it, you talk about your view of you believe every business has a story worth telling. So I want to start at the top of that hierarchy. You talk about understanding who we are. Most entrepreneurs, I would argue, probably say, well, I know who I am. I know who I'm meant to serve, but they've never actually done that deep inner work to synthesize what it is that they want to say. And it reminds me of the Abraham Lincoln quote, which is, if you want me to give a 5-hour speech, I'm ready to go right now. If you want me to give a 5-minute speech, I'm going to need 5 hours to prepare. How hard is it to boil all this stuff down into a concise message?
You want to take that?
Yeah, I primarily do that. So with what we do is we've put together a questionnaire, essentially, that we'll give to any of our clients before we work with them. And for a lot of them, it takes them some time. There are questions in there that they may have never thought about before. So they're going to have to put some time and energy into doing that. But what happens is we then come out with pages and pages of information. And how do we boil that down to truly represent who they are, and then apply that to a medium like a website or social should look like. And that's difficult. So that takes a lot of time. We do implement a little bit of AI to kind of boil things down and cut through a lot of that, streamline it. But a lot of it is just reading through their bio and then just being able to pick out the highlights and the points, almost turn it into a bullet point of, here's all the major things that has happened. But then once you do that, it makes it really easy to start figuring out what do they stand for, even to figure out like color palette. And they might come at you as a camping company, and then you start realizing that this clothing brand or this camping company is more than that. So then you add in your color palette is a rainbow of colors, mostly purples and whites, and they're a huge company that do a lot of stuff, and their color palette is not your typical outdoorsy color palette, but it represents exactly who they are. Trying to figure that out. And a lot of that is just the time and energy that we put in to getting to know our clients.
To kind of tag along to that is when we go through that process, a major portion of that questionnaire has to do with their story. And I'm sure you're familiar. I hope you're familiar with Chris Dew from the future. But this phrase is that he says about brands and commodities. It's just kind of been an anchor for us as we process bringing someone through to the other side, so that the way they're successful. And it's this statement: a product or service without a story is just a commodity, but a product is a brand. And that was so impactful for me, because I realized that there's not a single thing that I buy, apart from the things that are absolutely necessary for me to live, food, water, air, right? That doesn't have an emotional connection to, that I don't have an emotional connection to. So everyone has an emotional connection to something, and everyone has a story. And when we can boil down to find out, hey, you started this out of the midst of whatever you went through, or maybe you had a passion for it, or you just saw a need, and so now you have your personal experience, and there's somebody out there who can resonate with that. That's who we're bringing together. And when you get the story right, the magic happens on the other side.
Yeah, I love that. I want to go deeper into the story with you guys because I've experienced that with this podcast. A lot of times I talk about my ups, but I very much also share my downs. And it's those downs that I think attracted our initial podcast listeners, because every single entrepreneur on planet Earth, if there's one thing we're all united in, it's that we've had downs. It's inevitable in any entrepreneurial journey. And so I think that a lot of us underestimate where those sources and those stories can come from. Hayden, you just use an example of a founding story. Why are you doing this? That's one example of a story. Talk to us about some other ways that you can pick those stories out, because what I hear from listeners anytime we have an episode about telling your story, a lot of them say, I'm just a normal person. Like, I'm still working a 9 to 5. I don't know where my story is. How do you walk people through that?
I literally would say, well, you know what? I'm going to sit right here and you just tell me how you got started. That's it. Andrew's been in that conversation. There's like literally no magic to it. I sit back in the seat and I just crossed my leg and said, talk to me. I'm your friend. Let's hear it. And I just, maybe just start. And so they if they really have a hard time with figuring out what that looks like, then I'll ask a little bit deeper questions and say, they might say, well, I bought this building. Like, oh, okay, well, cool. What happened before that? Like, what got you into making leather patches for firemen's helmets, which is one of our clients. They do that. And what got you into that? Well, I was a firefighter and I really had a knack for this. And he, all of a sudden the story starts flowing. Yeah. And I usually let them know that I have my recorder going. So that way there's no surprise, but I want to capture the way they're communicating that at the end of the day. And so that's literally how it happens. I'll just start asking open-ended questions, just like kind of the way you did. So if it was you and me, Brian, then I would say, well, what got you into podcasting? What drew you to this?
Yeah, sometimes it's not easy. We sat with a client and actually have a really, really great story. They have owned a pizza. They have 3 restaurants. They own 3 Italian restaurants.
This was a good one, yeah.
And they've been around for 35 years. And we started asking about their story. And literally all I got was, we started in 1985. We have 2 boys. Our boys were at the restaurant every day. And, this is important to us. This is important to us. And like, that was it. It was just a bullet point. And then I think part of our job is to turn that into a story and make it exciting, but still resonate who they are. So we were able to do that by, being storytellers. So sometimes you don't necessarily, for example, these clients will tell you every day they're not storytellers. They don't know how to do that, how to be creative, but that's why they came to us, and it is doing really well. And she cried when she read it because she couldn't believe how accurate it was. But it was, just taking the words and moments that they have and then just stringing them together.
Yeah, Andrew, I want to pick on that example. I love that that's the one that you pulled from, because a lot of these local businesses, for all of us who grew up in any area that we all grew up in, we have those local businesses that I can think of, the pizza place that my youth soccer team, we all went to after games. And it's because we are so immersed in the brand that family built, since 1985, how many stories are deeply rooted within there. And I love that in your example, you gave that detail of, well, yeah, we have 2 boys. And so I find as an entrepreneur, I've been at this for 17 years now, and at this point, entrepreneurship is my life, of course. I can't separate the two. There's no separating Brian from the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. This is what I live, but I always find it so strange and interesting when people try to separate themselves, the people behind it, with the brand that they're building, and they feel like personal brands and company brands have to live in these different spheres. What's your take on that? Because I love the way that the 2 of you show up in your brand, but I also do love the brand that you've jointly built together.
Yeah. So I would say it depends. It really depends on the situation. So for some people, who they are and maybe them developing a personal brand just goes perfectly with the business that they've established. We have one client who was one of our first, actually. That was a really fun story, how we found her. Or actually, did she find us? I don't have no idea how that happened. But the story is that
we found each other.
I guess we found each other. Yeah, that's probably more like it. But the story there was she had this passion to basically. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before, and it was really cool. But she needed help with her website, and she built this incredible connection. She has this amazing community, but it came to a point where there was construction happening on her road right there, so it shut down any foot traffic, and she just like in her mind didn't think that she would do well on basically putting herself on camera, and basically what she didn't know is she already had a personal brand.
Yeah.
And so what we had to do is basically sit down with her and say, listen, what you don't know is you have a personal brand already. So if you just put yourself out there, then you'll start to get a lot more interaction with blending, basically taking who you are as a personal brand and taking your business that you've already built and just putting together and share the platforms. And she actually came back to us. She said, wow, those videos I did, fit checks through my boutique or just like outfit reveals from my boutique all of a sudden just got a lot more traction. And so it's case by case, to be honest. Sometimes it's good for someone to not incorporate their personal brand into it, but their story is integral, is an integral part of telling that brand on a public scale. So it's case by case. I would say that at the end of the day.
I think in the end, they need to realize that clients want a connection. They want a story. When people go to purchase products, they want to be tied to something that they can feel that they're connected with. So it is important to have that story. And you'll see that through major brands. One of the best examples I think I've ever seen is with Coca-Cola. And until almost dropped to zero sales come November, December, January, February. So they were like, how do we do that? And they started they created Santa Claus. The Santa Claus that we know today was created by Coca-Cola. And by creating that, linking it to their soda, they now have sales that don't drop year round. People drink Coke year round. But it was because they were able to tie it to a story. They were able to tie it to a feeling. And now there are lots of people that equate Christmas and Coke. I don't, but there are a lot of other people.
I do. I'm in that camp.
I'm there with you, Hayden, admittedly. I want to call out, Hayden, I love the way you articulated that notion of maybe our personal brands are separate from our business brands, but our stories are intertwined, and that's inevitable. And Andrew, that example of bringing the emotion into it, Santa Claus, we all think about the images and the visuals around Christmas time and seeing how Coke plays into that. You're right. However you feel about Coke, Andrew, you admittedly are not a Coke drinker around Christmas time, but here you are talking about that brand that they've created. So it's super powerful. And it actually leads me, now that we're talking about visuals, we're talking about brands in so many different ways and the stories that guide those. Where do our brands show up? So we understand who it is that we are, and we want to inject it into what we do. Hayden, you've already kind of teased out the importance of a website. I can actually see you guys right now. Most listeners can't see us right now, but I see your neon sign. I'm a sucker for neon signs. I see your branded hats that I expect nothing less from the two of you. But where are all the places that we inject these stories and our brands into?
That is a great question. I actually love that. So where do they show up? Your brand, first of all, you have to understand that not only is there a high of a process of where your visuals start or where your visuals come from. If you start with your visuals and then you get to your story and you start articulating that, which 9 times out of 10, folks will do their logos and their fonts and their typefaces and their colors before they talk about who their brand is or even dive into that, which is what we have, which we talk about quite often with businesses. Then you're putting the cart before the horse. So how do those brands show up? Where do those brands show up? They show up everywhere you put your logo. So if it's digital, if it's physical, is it a street sign? Is it a brochure? Your social media, they show up really anywhere. They show up on your hat if you put it on your apparel. However, however your brand is to be represented, that actually dictates the mediums in which your visual identity will be. Goes anywhere from, the highest form of visual to every person that works in your organization. So for us, I will say this. That was a great question, because at the end of the day, it shows up everywhere. I think I don't know if there's a specific place. For some people, it will show up in less places than others, but for businesses, it's going to show up everywhere who decide to dive into their brand. So thank you for that question. That was
it should show up in email. It should show up on any type of audio. Your brand is everything that is you. And there have been some brands that have done it so well that we now talk about it all the time. You have bath tissue, for example. We don't say tissue, we say Kleenex. And anytime, they've done such a good job of integrating their brand into Band-Aid. Society. Band-Aid in term. And same thing, if you see a really slick phone, or if you were to see a silver laptop, your initial reaction is going to be Apple. So it's not just your logo, it can be iconography, images, silhouettes, things that represent your brand. So if you're branding correctly, you should literally be everywhere.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll lean into this really quick. There's oftentimes a limit to where people think that your brand shows up. And Andrew made a really good point. It's not just the visual. It's the audio. It's the words that you communicate through any type of written form, digital form, the audio, the way you sound, the way you communicate. So, and in fact, if a lot of people they'll communicate. Here's my logo, right? Most of the time, all the time, really, we all connect with a brand with the way it sounds to me. That's how we connect, right? So we can see something, I like it, but if it's giving the opposite sound, if my logo is it's a little scrappy, it's a little negative, but if I come across as super bubbly and over the top and it doesn't seem to connect with the colors and the logo. So you always want to make sure as a brand, your brand shows up in your personality and in front of people in audio, visual, and written. So that's to answer your question.
Yeah, I'm glad that you added that, Hayden. I will say, obviously, I am a very energetic and happy person. And I remember the first time I ever worked with a photographer for headshots, the photographer was telling me, okay, be serious now. And I can't be serious for more than 10 seconds. And it just felt so weird. None of the pictures looked like me. And I think it's really important for us to have that understanding. Hayden, I'm glad you also like the question, because please launch a lead magnet, you guys. List all the places that we need to make sure our brand is injected. Because Andrew, when you said everywhere, and you actually use email as the example, in my head I said, yeah, it should be in our email signatures. Our brand should be on every single thing that we put out there. So I really love the depth in which you guys guided us through that question. My last question, I ask it at the end of every episode, but today we get a bonus one because there's two of you. I'm so glad that you're both here. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different phases of their own growth journey, and knowing that not only are you guys subject matter experts, but you're also one of us. You're also fellow entrepreneurs. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with? I'll let the two of you settle who's going first, because it's always harder to go second on this one.
Well, rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
All right, I'll do one that's a little more broad. The different things, and I have a 9-year-old who is really wanting to skateboard, and I think this piece of advice that I gave him is perfect for entrepreneurs. But it's the difference between motivation and consistency. Motivation are these quick spurts and moments of getting to do something. Oh, it's been 3 weeks, I'm going to go for a run. And I run for 2 or 3 days, and then you stop and time goes back. And as I was talking to him about skateboarding, you get better by being consistent, by practicing every day, by doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And I think it's the same. Like you are not going to find success as an entrepreneur if you are not consistent in what you do. You can't just have spurts of motivation and be motivated, because motivation doesn't last. You have to make yourself consistent. You know, your emails every day and your clients every day, then you're going to have people fall off. But just making sure that you're consistent in everything that you do, that is the magic. I have a cool graphic. I'll see if I can pull it up. I don't know if it'll work on here or if I could email it to you, but it's a really good graphic that I keep on my phone to remind me of this, because of the visual. The visual's really spot
Andrew,
on.
if it's the guy mining for diamonds, I'm going to be so excited right now. That's the visual that always gets me.
It is not.
Oh.
Yes, I love that.
So that's the difference between motivation and consistency. That's my advice.
That's great.
Your turn, Aristotle.
Yeah, Aristotle. No way.
Socrates.
No, not at all. Not at all. My probably it's thought provoking, and it's also practical for you, for people, for us. And we took a little bit of time and did this together, but tell your story to yourself and remind yourself how you got started, why you got started, and what you got started doing, and then write it down. Then read it back over. And when you think it's cheesy, when you think it's cringy, when you think it's embarrassing, that's when you put a video camera on and you share it with the world. It doesn't matter how goofy it looks. It doesn't matter. Just be real about your story. The good, the bad, the ugly, the challenging, and then share it with the world. And you'll be surprised by how many people connect with influence will go. Because at the end of the day, do we all want to make money? Absolutely. We all want to make money. But there's been people in our own lives who told their own personal stories that have influenced us to take us to the next level. The question is, who are you going to influence with your story for the benefit of not only them, but also you?
Boom. I love that advice from both of you. I feel like those are the foundational elements of any successful endeavor in anything. And Hayden, quite frankly, as you were giving that advice, it was giving me goosebumps, because as a podcaster, as someone who puts myself out there, 7 days a week for so many years, over 1,100 episodes, I think you really alluded to the double-edged sword that we all must embrace, which is not only to hit that record button, but you emphasize so much, hit the publish button, get it out into the world. And I love the fact that you guys are encouraging that for people in so many ways, to find their story, tell their story, to weave it into brands that are memorable and connect with people. So I'm a big fan of the work that you guys are doing and the brand that you've built. So at this point, drop those links on us for listeners who want to find all this cool stuff that you're doing and putting into the world. Where should they go from here?
Go to our website. That's number one. Go to our website, and then you can follow us on social media. Go to our handles. We have Instagram and Facebook. We post with just about anything there. On our website, you can find a link to our newsletter. We put out twice a month. One's like a quick 5-minute tip on just like how to, just something to benefit your business. And then just another service that we provide is the other one. And then we also have a toolkit that we've put together for resources. It's just everything that we've come together and said, if we could help a business right now, fast, here it is. And so we have anywhere from ChatGPT prompts that'll help your business to social media guides, a logo checker, just to kind of see where you're at with your logo, checklist. Super important. There's a bunch of really cool things. We're always updating it. We're always adding things. So we'll drop that. With that, we'll send all this stuff over, and that's kind of what we have.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Find those show notes. You can click right on through to the kansocreative.com, as well as all the other resources, links, social accounts, as well as we're also linking to Andrew and Hayden's personal LinkedIns. So if you want to continue the conversation and you want to have their eyes on your brand, as scary as that may be, this is how you start improving it. Andrew alluded to it in your story where you're just like, that's why people like us exist. And Andrew, I absolutely love that. So Hayden, Andrew, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having us.